Don't do one particular diet just because one fitness influencer or one YouTuber is saying this is what I did, it works for me, because it might not work for you. Everybody's body is going to be a little bit different. You want to do something that works for you, makes you feel good, makes you look good, and makes you perform at your best. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the whole steak versus salad debate that was a huge part of the build-up in the Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 1 fight. But before I get started, I'd just like to say that if you enjoy these types of videos, be sure to smash that like button so I know to make more of these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. Now onto the topic at hand. A little while back, Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz ended up fighting in the UFC, and part of the build-up in that fight was the whole steak versus salad. Nate Diaz, being somebody who is a vegetarian, Conor McGregor, he ended up making a comment about how you saw me on salad, now watch me on steak. And it was also a storyline in the Game Changers movie. They ended up talking about it a little bit. So I'm going to be explaining some of the pros and cons with vegetarian, vegan versus carnivore or meat eating. And in order to do that, I'm going to break this video down into different topics. First, I want to get into the macronutrients and how each compares. So I'm going to get into the types of fats, proteins, carbohydrates. I will also get into the whole foods versus processed foods. Then I will get into my own experience, as I have tried both. I'm currently doing carnivore, but I have tried vegan in the past. And lastly, I will explain which one should you try and which one will be best for you. If there's a particular topic that interests you and you don't want to watch the entire video, I will be including timestamps in the description. So if you want to skip ahead to a particular topic, go ahead, look in the description under the timestamps, and you can skip ahead to the part that you want instead of having to watch the whole video. Now, with regard to macronutrients, the first thing that I want to cover is fat. With regard to fat, pretty much the only fat that is required by your body that your body cannot make is going to be essential fatty acids. Whenever you hear the term essential in front of either protein or fat, that means that your body is not able to produce it on its own and you need to acquire it from your food. Now, with regard to fats, you have essential fatty acids, and the two main essential fatty acids are going to be DHA and EPA. DHA is going to be docosahexaenoic acid. EPA is going to be icosapentaenoic acid. Those are typically going to be found in fish. So if you are eating meat or if you are eating fish, then you will find those in meats. You will find it in things like grass-fed meats, and you will find it in abundance in wild-caught fish. Now, with regard to a vegan diet or just in general plant-based diet, it's going to be a lot more difficult to be able to get these into your diet, and one of the reasons being is with plants and with a lot of nuts and seeds, it's not going to be a good source of omega-3 or 6. Generally speaking, a lot of plant foods, if you do want to get EPA or DHA in your diet, you're going to have to get it through ALA. ALA is alpha-linolenic acid, and one of the problems with ALA is that it has to be converted into DHA and EPA, and the conversion process, it's not very efficient. Basically, roughly 5% of ALA is going to be converted into EPA, and roughly 0.5% of ALA is going to be converted into DHA. So the whole conversion process from converting ALA to EPA or DHA is not going to be as effective or as efficient as it would be for somebody who is consuming either meats or fish, because if you are consuming wild-caught fish or if you are consuming grass-fed meats, then the EPA and DHA is already active in the meat tissue. It doesn't need to go through a whole conversion process. So it's going to be a lot more efficient for your body to get those nutrients through meats or fish as opposed to getting it through plants, nuts, and seeds. Another issue when it comes to fats is going to be omega-3s versus omega-6s. Ideally, you would want to have an omega-3 to omega-6 ratio of roughly 1:1. In our current diets, we get an abundance of omega-6s. And when you get an abundance of omega-6s, it's going to be pro-inflammatory, whereas omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. So if you are consuming a vegan diet, or even if you're not vegan, but a majority of your foods are coming from plants, plants are going to have a much more abundance of omega-6s versus omega-3s. So plants will be more anti-inflammatory if you don't manage that ratio. Now, if you are consuming meats, the best way to get omega-3s and to boost that omega-3 to 6 ratio up in your diet is going to be to consume grass-fed meats and also wild-caught fish. Grass-fed meats and wild-caught fish are going to be much higher in omega-3s relative to omega-6. Now, the omega-3 to 6 ratio when it comes to wild-caught meats and wild-caught fish, it's still going to contain more omega-6 than omega-3, but it's going to be much closer to that 1:1 ratio than you will get if you consume plants. If you are consuming plants, the level of omega-3s is going to be very, very low. So if you are deficient in omega-3s in your diet, if you are going vegan or if you're majority plant-based, that is something that you will have to supplement with. Whereas if you are not doing the vegan diet or if you are not majority plant-based, then you can get a good amount of omega-3s from your diet as long as you incorporate grass-fed meats and also wild-caught fish. So that is one of the pros to consuming meat versus plants. In a nutshell, your body doesn't have to convert ALA to DHA or EPA. It's already readily available in the meat tissue, and the omega-3 to 6 ratio is going to be much closer to that 1-to-1, which is going to be optimal for your body's function. Now, next it's going to come to protein. Just as with fats, we also have essential amino acids. Essential amino acids are amino acids that your body is not able to produce. There are essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. Non-essential amino acids are amino acids that your body is already able to produce on its own. You don't need to acquire them through food. With essential amino acids, your body is not able to produce those amino acids. So the only way that you can get them in your diet is through food. When it comes to vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, versus meats, fish, that type of stuff, every single meat product is going to contain every single amino acid. And because it contains every single essential amino acid, that classifies it as a complete protein. There are two types of proteins. There are incomplete proteins and there are complete proteins. An incomplete protein does not contain all of the essential amino acids, whereas a complete protein contains every single one of the essential amino acids. Now, when it comes to incomplete proteins, I just said that it doesn't contain all of them, and that's technically not true because every single amino acid is going to be found in a plant product or grain. The problem is that with incomplete proteins, it's not so much that not all of the essential amino acids are found inside of that product. The problem is that it is not found in adequate amounts. So you will have all of the essential amino acids in an incomplete protein. However, they will not be in there in the correct proportions and in adequate amounts. So you will need to combine multiple foods if you want to get a complete protein. One of the problems with the vegan or vegetarian diet is that it is a lot more difficult to get adequate amount of protein if you're not educated on proper nutrition. When it comes to the vegan diet, again, vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, legumes, they're all considered incomplete proteins, which means while they do have all of the essential amino acids, certain amino acids are not in the proteins in terms of adequate amounts. And in order to be classified as a complete protein, you need to have all of the essential amino acids in adequate amounts. That is the important part, in adequate amounts. While all of the essential amino acids are located in your plant foods, they are going to be deficient in certain amino acids. So if you want to get a complete protein, you need to combine different food groups. One of the examples would be if you want to get a complete protein, you won't be able to get it just from vegetables, but if you combine vegetables with grains, that forms a complete protein. Same things with nuts and seeds. If you consume nuts and seeds, you will not be able to get adequate amounts of all the essential amino acids. However, if you combine nuts and seeds with grains, then those together combine to make a complete protein. One of the common examples used for food combining and making complete proteins is going to be a peanut butter sandwich, because peanut is a legume and the sandwich, which is the bread, is going to be the grain. So when you combine a legume with a grain, you get a complete protein, which is why something like a peanut butter sandwich would be one way of food combining that makes a complete protein. Now, when it comes to food combining, you don't need to combine food at every single meal. As long as you're varying the foods that you get and the different food groups that you get throughout the day, that's good enough. You don't need to get a complete protein in every single meal. As long as you're getting adequate amounts of all the essential amino acids throughout the course of the day, that is going to be beneficial. You don't need to eat vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, legumes at every single meal. You could have vegetables for breakfast, you could have grains for lunch, you could have legumes and nuts and seeds for dinner. There are tons of ways that you can do it. The whole food combining at every single meal to get a complete protein at every meal is a little bit outdated. However, there is a little bit of validity to it. You could experiment with each different method. You could try forming complete proteins at each meal, see how you feel with that. You can try just combining different foods throughout the day, not worrying about every single meal having a complete protein, see how that works for you. Figure out which one works for you, see how you feel on each one. Whichever one makes you feel better, keep doing that way, because as long as you feel good, that's the important thing. Now that we've discussed essential fatty acids and essential amino acids, next we're going to go on to carbohydrates. The thing with carbohydrates is that there is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate, at least to our current knowledge. As far as we know right now, there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. The only carb that our body needs is glucose. And the thing with glucose is our liver is able to produce glucose, so we don't need to get it from our diet because our body is capable of getting it on our own. Now, one of the things when it comes to carbohydrates, a lot of people think that you need carbohydrates to give you energy. However, that's not the case. Yes, carbohydrates will give you some energy, but you can also use energy in the form of ketones, which is your fat. So you don't need to consume carbohydrates in order to get energy because you can get it from any of the foods that you consume. And one of the other things with regard to carbohydrates and energy is you can get carbohydrates from your protein. I know a lot of people are a little bit confused by this, so I'm going to elaborate a little bit. There's this process that your body has, and it's called gluconeogenesis. And with gluconeogenesis, basically what happens is your body is going to convert amino acids into glucose. So while protein and amino acids are technically not a carbohydrate, they can be converted into glucose, which is a simple sugar that your body uses in order to give your body glucose, which is the energy source that your body uses. The other thing with regard to glucose is that the only thing that really utilizes glucose is your brain. Your brain uses a huge amount of glucose throughout the day. That is the main source of energy for your brain. However, your body can function on ketones, and you don't need to consume tons of amounts of glucose throughout the day to function properly. You can get energy from ketones, and you can get all the energy you need through the calories that you consume through things like meats. However, if you are the type of person that you just don't feel good operating when your body is in a state of ketosis, then you would probably be better off incorporating more foods such as carbohydrates to fuel your body. However, it's going to come down to how you feel. For me personally, my body responds really well when it's in a state of ketosis, so I don't need to consume carbohydrates because I have great energy when I follow something like a keto diet or carnivore diet or a paleo diet, and I typically get really weak and I get really low energy when I incorporate a lot of carbohydrates in my diet. So for me personally, that's why I don't consume it, just because I don't feel my most energetic. But you have to figure out what exactly works for you. Figure out what works for you and then do it. Now that we've discussed the macronutrients, we went through the essential fatty acids, essential amino acids, and carbohydrates. Next, I would like to discuss whole foods versus processed foods. One of the benefits to the carnivore diet as opposed to a vegan diet is that on a vegan diet, it's a lot easier to consume processed foods, whereas with the carnivore diet, it's a lot more difficult to consume processed foods because you're really limiting yourself to only animal products. Whereas with a vegan diet, most of the products that most people are going to consume is going to be heavily processed. I'm not saying that this is what most vegans do, but a lot of vegans in my experience tend to focus on things like heavily processed grains. They focus on things like pop. A lot of things that are technically vegan are not healthy for you. Things like sugar. Sugar is technically vegan, but if you consume a lot of sugar, it's going to be heavily processed and it's going to strip a lot of vitamins and minerals from your body. Same thing with things like processed bread. If you're consuming really heavily processed bread, it's not going to be as good for you as if you were to consume something like a fermented sourdough bread. It's going to be a lot easier for your body to absorb, and your body's just going to function a lot better. Again though, experiment with yourself. Some people can do perfectly fine with bread, other people it'll destroy them. Me personally, if I were to eat bread right now, I would be in the toilet having explosive diarrhea and I would probably end up in the hospital because of my ulcerative colitis. However, if you are one of those people who just has really good genetics and your body is able to process it perfectly fine, then you might be able to just consume bread, get away with it, and it won't affect you whatsoever. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. If you are the type of person where things like gluten or heavily processed foods irritate you, then the vegan diet, you're going to have to be even more diligent than you would have had you not had those issues. Ideally, if you are going to incorporate a vegan diet into your lifestyle, then you want to try and stick to whole foods as much as possible. So vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, those aren't really going to be an issue because those are already whole foods. It's going to be more when it comes to grains. A lot of times people on a vegan diet, they tend to favor the heavily processed grains. One of the reasons is it's just more available, it's more readily available, it's cheaper, so people that are on a budget, it's going to be a lot cheaper to get Wonder Bread as opposed to a fermented type of bread. It's going to be a lot more expensive. So if you are on a budget, it's going to be a lot easier on a vegan diet to opt in for those processed foods. However, I would implore you that if you are on a vegan diet, try to stick towards whole foods as opposed to processed foods because your body's going to feel much better on those foods. Again though, if you're able to get away with it, then fine. If you need to save some money and you're on a budget, you can go for some of those heavily processed foods. But if you're not gonna feel great on it, like someone like me, if you have digestive issues, if you have GI distress, if you consume heavily processed foods, then I would strongly encourage you to stick to more whole foods and avoid processed foods altogether. This also goes for somebody following a carnivore diet. Ideally, you want all your foods coming from meat, eggs, that type of stuff. You want to stay away from processed meats like cold cuts or any of those deli meats that you would find in the grocery store. If you are able to consume them and you feel good, then fine, you can incorporate them. However, if you notice that you feel them and you get GI distress or you get issues with acid reflux, anything like that, then stick towards whole foods because those are going to be preferable, especially if it is your main objective to optimize your health levels. If your main objective is to optimize your aesthetics, so the way you look, then really it's going to come down to calories in versus calories out. The food quality isn't going to matter. However, if your main objective is to optimize health, then I wouldn't focus on calories in versus calories out. I would focus on eating whole foods and eating foods that make you feel your best. Now I'm just going to share my personal experience with each of the diets. I've stated this in several videos. I'm just going to reiterate it. If you've already heard this in other videos, you could skip ahead to the next part, which is which one is going to be right for you. But for those of you who haven't been watching my videos and are new to the channel, I'm going to get into my experience with each. I want to backtrack a little bit. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis back in 2010, and that's kind of what started my whole journey on this health and fitness lifestyle. And in 2010, that's when I started the paleo diet. I tried pretty much every single diet, but the paleo diet, the keto diet, and the carnivore diet are the three diets that for me personally work the absolute best. So those are the ones that I have been doing for a majority of the last decade. Now, when it comes to the vegan diet, I've tried it one time in 2015. It was January of 2015. I wanted to try it for 3 months to see how my body responded. And the first 2 weeks were absolutely phenomenal. My digestion was amazing. I felt great. My energy levels were good. Immediately after that first 2 weeks, everything went downhill. I started getting really bad diarrhea and cramps, and I was getting really weak from that second week. And what happened was there were certain grains that I noticed that upset my stomach. There were 7 different grains that I would alternate throughout the course of the week. They were all gluten-free grains. I would cycle through amaranth, kasha, buckwheat, brown rice, millet, teff, and there was one other one I can't recall at the moment. But those were basically the ones that I was rotating throughout my food rotation. And I noticed that there were a couple, I believe it was teff and amaranth in those first 2 weeks that were really wreaking havoc on me. Whenever I consumed it, within 5 minutes I had to run to the washroom and I would see it in the toilet right after eating it. It just went straight through me. I removed those, things were okay for a little bit, and then 2 weeks later, same issues arose. I removed a couple more, and that continued throughout the duration of the rest 2.5 months. Now, one of the things, by the end of that, the only 3 grains that I was able to really consume that didn't negatively impact me too badly were millet, buckwheat, and long grain brown rice. So I decided after the 3 months that, yeah, that was enough for me, and that's when I switched over to the carnivore diet for the second time. The first time I tried the carnivore diet was in 2013. I did it for 2 months, and it was the best I ever felt in my life. So I decided to try it again after the vegan diet because I remembered how great I felt in 2013. So I did 3 months of vegan diet. The last 2.5 months, it was diarrhea every single day. And then within 3 to 4 days of switching from vegan to carnivore, all my issues went away. My bowel movements went back to normal. I was having really great energy levels. I was able to get through my workouts without being sore. And overall, my mental clarity was really good. And overall, everything was great. My digestion was amazing. I had no issues with flare-ups with regard to my ulcerative colitis. And for me, that is one of the reasons why I continue to come back to the carnivore diet, just because of how amazing I feel. Now, when I did the carnivore diet back in 2015, I only did it for 2 months, the same as 2013. And then I went right back to the paleo diet. And with the paleo diet, one of the things is I stuck to all whole foods. I didn't eat anything processed. And while I was doing the paleo diet, it was pretty much carnivore with a little bit of plant food. And that's basically been the last 3 or 4 years. The last 3 or 4 years, I haven't really incorporated too many vegetables. When I do incorporate a lot of vegetables, for me personally, I just get really bloated for one. Next thing is, depending on the vegetables, I'll get really bad gas, and certain vegetables will go right through me to the point where I have to go to the washroom right away and I'll have diarrhea. And I will actually see physical pieces of the food that I ate in the washroom when I go. So for me personally, that is why I'm doing carnivore right now. The current carnivore diet that I'm doing, I started it on March 1st, so it's been 6 months. Well, it'll be 6 months on Monday, but I've been doing it for 6 months, and this is, again, the best I've ever felt. Originally, I was planning on only doing it for 3 months, but after the 3-month mark, I felt amazing, and I didn't want to try something new, so I thought, okay, I'm just gonna stick to the carnivore diet. I'm gonna do it for as long as I can until I notice that the effects are no longer benefiting me. Once they're no longer benefiting me, then I'll try something else. However, right now, everything is feeling amazing and nothing is bothering me, so I'm gonna keep doing it until everything doesn't feel amazing anymore. I started the year with a vegetarian experiment. I was originally gonna do 3 months of vegan again, just to see how it felt, but I remembered how terrible I felt the first time that I tried it. So I decided that on my rest days, which are the days that I don't work out, I would experiment doing 2 days vegetarian. Days 1, 2, and 4 are my workout days. On those days, I was paleo. Days 3 and 5 are my rest day. On those days, I would go vegetarian. And my weight went down, my strength went down, my body fat went up, my muscle mass went down, my sleep suffered. I started getting issues with seborrheic dermatitis that came back. I was having really bad issues with cramping, diarrhea. All of that subsided as soon as I started the carnivore diet. Well, not as soon. The first 7 days, I had a little bit of diarrhea on the carnivore diet. Day 8 up until now, so the last 5 months, 3 weeks, everything's been phenomenal. So for me personally, that is what I like to do because that is just how I feel my best. When it comes to which is right for you and which should you try, experiment with each. You don't have to do vegan, you don't have to do carnivore, you could do a mix. You could try paleo, you could try doing paleo for a month, try doing keto for a month, try doing carnivore for a month, try doing vegetarian for a month, try doing vegan for a month. Do each one for a month, see which one makes you feel your best. Keep a food journal, see which foods make you feel your best. Once you have a list of the foods that make you feel amazing, stick to those foods. If you notice certain foods irritate you, avoid those foods, take them out of the rotation. That is going to be the best way to determine the optimal diet for you. Don't do one particular diet just because one fitness influencer or one YouTuber is saying, this is what I did, it works for me, because it might not work for you. Everybody's body is going to be a little bit different. You want to do something that works for you, makes you feel good, makes you look good, and makes you perform at your best. That's pretty much the best advice that I could give you, and that's pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to make more of these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.